niggas run around here talking about, yeah, you ain't my real daddy, you ain't my real daddy. Well, look here, I'm fucking your mama for real. Now that's real. Bitches.
People, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. So at the end of the day, like I said, I am not in any way, shape, fashion, or form a supporter of Trump. I am a supporter of the black agenda as it relates to using that black agenda for power, for the advancement of power and empowerment for our community. And when I say black, I'm not talking about black in global terms. I'm talking about descendants of American slaves. But this is always a very good opportunity to look at the mistakes of others and to use those mistakes to sort of teach yourself what to and what not to do. What is the correct application of power and what is the incorrect application of power, right? Because let me show the example first, and then we could talk about it after.
And I don't know about that. I do know that we have, when military ballots come in, it's not just military, it's also military and overseas citizens. The military part of that does generally go Republican. The overseas citizen part of it generally goes very Democrat.
No, but this was
a mix of them.
Yeah, that's okay. But I got like 78% in the military. These ballots were all for this. They didn't tell me overseas. Could be overseas too, but I get votes overseas too, Ryan. You know, in all fairness. No, they came in, a large batch came in, and it was quote 100% for Biden. And that is criminal. You know, that's criminal. Okay, that's another criminal. That's another of the many criminal events. Many criminal events here. I don't know. Look, Brad, I have to find 12,000 votes, and I have them times a lot, and therefore I won the state. That's before we go to the next step, which is in the process of right now. You know. And I watched you this morning, and you said, well, there was no criminality, but I mean, all of this stuff is very dangerous stuff. When you talk about no criminality, I think it's very dangerous for you to say that. I just don't know why you don't want to have the votes counted as they are. Like even you, when you went and did that check, and I was surprised because, you know, I didn't consider the check, and we found a few thousand votes that were against me. I was actually surprised because the way that check was done, all you're doing is recertifying existing votes, and you know you were given votes and you just counted them up, and you still found 3,000 that were bad. That was sort of surprising. That came down to 3 or 5. I don't know, a lot. You know, still a lot of votes, but you have to go back to check from past years with respect to signatures. And if you check with Fulton County, you'll have hundreds of thousands because they dumped ballots into Fulton County and the other county next to it. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break. You know, we have that in spades already, or we can keep it going. But that's not fair to the voters of Georgia because they're going to see what happened. And they're going to see what happened. I mean, I'll take on anybody you want with regard to Ruby Freeman and her lovely daughter, a very lovely young lady, I'm sure. But Ruby Freeman, I will take Freeman. I will take on anybody you want. And the minimum, there were 18,000 ballots, but they used them 3 times. So that's, you know, a lot of votes. And that one event, and they were all to Biden, by the way. That's the other thing we didn't say. You know, the Ruby Freeman, one thing I forgot to say, which was the most important. Do you know that every single ballot she did went to Biden? You know that, right? Do you know that, by the way, Brett? Every single ballot that she did through the machine at early in the morning went to Biden. Did you know that, Ryan?
That's not accurate, Mr. President.
Huh. What is accurate?
The numbers that we are showing are accurate.
No, about Ruby Freeman, about early in the morning, Ryan, when the woman took when the whole gang took the stuff out of from under the table, right? Do you know?
Listen, I know that this is excruciating, but it's important for you to listen to a full, showing of this. I think you already have your own machinations as to how this is horribly wrong, how this is completely inappropriate, how this is ineffectual in the most obvious way. I'm fairly confident you already get that, right? But it's important to let it go because there's other things I want to go into too. I want to see whether or not he does something I know he did during this, but I'm not going to try to pan through the whole entire thing to try to find it. So I'm going to let it play for a little bit longer.
Do you know who those ballots, do you know who they were made out to? Do you know who they were voting for?
No, not specifically.
Did you ever check?
We did what I described to you earlier.
No. Did you ever check the ballots that were scammed by Ruby Freeman, a known political operative balloteer? Did you ever check who those votes were for?
We've looked into that situation that you described.
No, they were 100% for Biden. 100%. There wasn't a Trump vote in the whole group. Why don't you want to find this, Ryan? What's wrong with you? I heard your lawyer is very difficult, actually, but I'm sure you're a good lawyer. You have a nice last name. But I'm just curious, why do you keep fighting this thing? It just doesn't make sense. We're way over the 17,779, right? We're way over that number. And if you took just Ruby Freeman, we're over that number by five or six times when you multiply it out times 3. And every single ballot went to Biden. And you didn't know that, but now you know it. So tell me, Brad, what are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this. And it's going to be very costly. It's not fair to take it away from us like this. Brad, what are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this. What are we going to do? We won the election, and it's not fair to take it away from us like this. And it's going to be very costly in many ways. And I think you have to say that you're going to re-examine it, and you can re-examine it, but re-examine it with people that want to find answers, not people that don't want to find answers. For instance, I'm hearing Ryan, and he's probably, I'm sure, a great lawyer and everything, but he's making statements about those ballots that he doesn't know. But he's making them with he did make them with surety, but now I think he's less sure because the answer is they all went to Biden. And that alone wins us the election by a lot. So.
Mr. President, you have people that submit information, and we have our people that submit information, and then it comes before the court, and the court then has to make a determination. We have to stand by our numbers. We believe our numbers are right.
Why do you say that, though? I don't know. I mean, sure, we can play this game with the courts.
I think we've heard enough. Oh, goodness gracious. Goodness gracious. Where do I begin? First of all, who the fuck came up with this idea for the president to have this call with the Secretary of State of Georgia and the governor of Georgia? Whoever came up with this idea to have this call in the first place should be fired immediately. But it doesn't matter because this call has more of a long-standing issue with it that I'm going to get into. You don't get an audience with the president, right? You shouldn't be able to get an audience with the president with regards to stuff like this. You know, who should be on this call is the president's chief of staff and his attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Those are the two people who should have been on this call. Then you have to frame the actual structure of the call. You can sort of see towards the tail end of the call when you listen to the whole entire thing. This was him begging the Georgia governor and the Georgia Secretary of State for them to exercise their power. He's the president of the United States, but he's on a phone call begging the Georgia governor and the Georgia Secretary of State to exercise their power. Now, if the reporting is true that these individuals have been paid off handsomely by Dominion in order to, help flip the election, if that is true, why would you assume that they wouldn't have also been given some sort of gentleman's agreement in the background to guarantee even more, to make sure that they're fully solidified in their resolve to potentially get you out of office? Why in the world would you have taken the meeting in the first place? Especially if your whole goal is to beg personally for another person to exercise their power. When you do that, you're automatically stating to that person that that person is more powerful than you. You're stating to that person, hey, you're more powerful than me. Can you give me something I couldn't otherwise get myself? But you're the president of the United States. The whole structure of that call was ridiculous. It should have been his Secretary of State, not Secretary of State, but his Chief of Staff and Rudy Giuliani on this call. There should have been a simple statement. The president is willing to appoint certain people to special counsel to review this matter. The president is willing to confiscate voting machines in the state of Georgia to preserve evidence. Right? And we want access to the data that we need to have access to in order to determine whether or not this is a fraudulent election or not. And if you don't give satisfactory answers as to what's going on, we're going to exercise our power in this regard. And we'll take it to the courts if we need to, but we're going to exercise our power in this regard, and we're not going to give a damn whether or not it hurts you or helps you. We're not going to give a damn. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. That's what this call is about. This call is about, hey, you need to provide us with what we're asking for, and if you don't, we're going to go ahead and do X, Y, and Z. And if you don't want to state X, Y, and Z, fine. But at this late hour, you shouldn't even be having this phone call. But let me restructure it, because you saw some sort of appeals to sort of, if you see the whole thing, you'll definitely see multiple examples of it. But you see some sort of appeal to common sense, right? Some sort of appeal to your personal public image. And then there's also, if you see the whole thing, there's concessions being made to saying to the effect of, hey, I'm not going to hold you guys fully accountable. I'm not going to try to hold this up, but hey, you guys will look good if you did X, Y, and Z. You guys will look really good if you did X, Y, and Z. What you're seeing is how white people normally talk and negotiate with other white people. They may, in the public, denigrate a white person to the white meat. Pun intended. Right? They may cut them to the white meat. Right? But in private, they're willing to make a deal with one another. In private, they're willing to whether it means devolve or promote themselves to a higher level, depending on your axis, whether or not they're doing something for you or against you, I guess, is your definition of the vector direction. But they're willing to default to a more primal definition of power, which is, hey, if you give me what I want, then we automatically are friends. And if we can negotiate something behind the scenes that gives me what I want, I'm okay with giving you what you want and publicly reversing myself, right? That's how white people have conversations with other white people. It's not the same with other black people. I mean, with black people. With black people, the exercise of power is, if I don't dominate this person, if I don't completely, totally dominate this person, then I am a weaker person, because I already know that this person is a black person with multi-generational, especially if they are a descendant of American slaves, I'm speaking of, not just black in general. But if they're a descendant of American slaves, then I know that they have had a multi-generational history of wealth depravity. And therefore, why would I, or why should I lose this negotiation? Whether it be a salary negotiation, whether it be terms for a contract between businesses, no matter what the situation is, if it's a white person and a black person, the correct exercise of power is dominance. When it's a white person versus a white person, then they default to another level of power, or different level or different zone of power, which is, hey, if you can give me what I want, I'll give you what you want, and I can completely reverse myself so far as working with you or not working with you in the future. Right? And that's what he tried to use in this conversation that he had with these individuals, which doesn't work. Because what you're having is, you're having the multi-century defined tactic or refined tactic of white-splaining being applied to another white person, right? In this situation, this is what the black media isn't telling you, by the way. This is what Black Authority, Professor Black Truth, Yvette Carnell, who else? Tariq Nasheed. I don't even much want to put in Antonio Moore, because he's sort of doing entertainment shit now. He's more of an entertainment reporter. I guess that's his niche now. But anyways, this is what they're not telling you, because I guess they're exercising a certain level of power too, right? They're adhering to the 48 laws of power, and they're exercising some sort of tenet of it as well. But they're not necessarily telling you this. But they're not going into the fact that there is voter fraud, right? Because they don't want to attach their hat to this individual. But really, what actually happened is Democrats stole the election because they could not get the black vote. And without the black vote, they would lose. And so they exercised a coercive level of power to organize fraud, right? In order to win the election. I'm monitoring my words here so I can get into that lesson a little bit later. Right? Okay. So that's what they did. Fine. But that has implications so far as the black media's agenda pushes in the future, right? Because if the Democratic Party is actually stealing elections in order to get away from not having, in order for them not to have to appeal in fundamental ways to the black vote, in order to legitimately earn our vote, then we can't actually push forward an agenda. Well, that's not a problem for the aforementioned individuals, because they're actually not trying to push an agenda. When you look at the Black Authority specifically, it's very funny how that individual voted in this election. I thought it was no reparations, no vote, right? It was no reparations, no vote. Again, still that individual voted. We don't know who those individuals are. Who I have an idea of who at least one of them is, because if you take a certain black MGTOW person and take his voice and modulate it down, you can damn near match Professor Black Truth's voice, if you look at some of the words being used by Professor Black Truth, because if you listen to him a lot, you notice that he says a whole bunch of weird ass white words, weird words that are not in the common vernacular of black people. And you could look at that other person who I think he is, and you could see that person actually saying those things. Now you have to go back. You know what I'm saying? This is something that you have to do for a while. You can't necessarily just do this off the cuff, right? You have to know those individuals and have been following those individuals. Funny enough, I've been following the individual who I think he is, and already parted ways with that individual, and now this individual is sort of popping back up on the scene as Professor Black Truth, right? So that's one thing. But those individuals don't really... It's funny how that individual voted in the last election, but yet still we're supposed to follow him, right? It was supposed to be no reparations, no vote, right? And he talks about those billboards, but again, those billboards were actually promoting his business. He said that shit about, oh, well, this billboard company required us to provide attribution and blah, blah, blah. We don't know that. We don't know that. We don't know that because we don't know him. We don't know anything about him. We don't know his name. We can't call that company with his name and say, hey, did you guys require attribution for these billboards? Can you provide a blah, blah, blah email or something like that that proves that you required attribution? And even if they did, it doesn't matter because he wrote it off on his business's taxes as a business expense, right? And we don't know anything about this person's finances or the sources of his finances. So if he's doing those billboards to credentialize himself in the black media, right? Yeah, we could turn that back on that individual. If he's using those billboards to credentialize himself within the black media, and we don't know the sourcing of his income, then at the end of the day, whatever he does is illegitimate, right? If David Duke disguised his voice and now all of a sudden he's a part of the black media, right? Can we trust anything that he does? No, we can't trust anything that he does because knowing who he is, it doesn't matter if he's doing anything for the movement, quote unquote, temporarily. We know that globally he has a track record that says that he is not for black empowerment, right? And because we don't know anything about Black Authority, nor anything about Professor Black Truth, those two people are completely canceled, in my opinion, from being legitimate sources of media with regards to our empowerment. We don't know who those individuals are. I have an idea of who one of them is, right? But we don't know any, and put it if you want to put it on an idea. There was a point where, if you look for my comments on I made a statement because I've called into a show a couple of times. Right, I made a statement in the chat of who I thought that individual was, and then Black Authority, the very next day, made a video on the business trying to denigrate that other black guy in the MGTOW community. I guess the heat was a little bit too hot in the kitchen, so he decided to try to throw some cover for his friend by denigrating him in terms of MGTOW, in order to distance himself from being associated with that individual and try to throw cover, right? This shit goes deep. This shit goes kind of deep. But then you have Black Authority also trying to comment on the vaccinations, the vaccines. Again, me, Jesse, I am not for vaccinations, typically, if you know anything about me. However, I watch one of the best sources I've had for medical information with regards to the coronavirus has been MedCram. If you look at MedCram, their YouTube channel, the guy is a pulmonologist, right? I've been following his stuff since February of last year, and he's a pulmonologist who's actually, as a pulmonologist, because that's dealing with respiratory issues, He's been in environments with coronavirus this entire time, right? That's where I get my regimen of taking vitamin D, vitamin C, quercetin, zinc, right? And the quercetin has actually helped me out a large amount with my diabetes, right? Because when you add quercetin to metformin, it's a great combination, right? You just have to be careful because it affects your kidneys, but you know, it's a great combination so far as lowering your blood sugar. It's awesome, all right? But I've gotten all that stuff from MedCram. I've gotten the whole, and if you watch MedCram, it's not just some cookie cutter shit. He goes into actual biology, right? Like actual biochemistry when it comes down to these things, and explains it from literally ground level of why these things work. I have in my personal struggle, I also have, you know, because high blood pressure comes along with it. I had a temporary period where I wasn't taking my blood pressure medication because I thought that it was negatively affecting my risk factors or risk profiles with coronavirus, right? And then it came out that actually it's a decent thing long term. But those, again, that information I was able to get from MedCram. That individual fully explained the vaccine, the mRNA vaccine, and has already taken that vaccine, right? And I know that that's significant because at the end of the day, I know what this individual has basically been promoting. He was the first person to put out the hydroxychloroquine was actually an effective medication. He also was talking about remdesivir. Hydroxychloroquine is similar to quercetin because it's a zinc ionophore, right? And therefore it helps the intake of zinc into the actual cytoplasm to actually disrupt any replication of virus, right? Go to MedCram. It's a full, I think it's like episode 35 or 37, one of those two, right? That where he goes into full detail of how hydroxychloroquine works in combination with zinc, right? And how quercetin is also a zinc ionophore, and you can use that in order to get the same effects, beneficial effects of zinc uptake without actually having to take hydroxychloroquine, which actually has more negative side effects than quercetin, obviously. All right? That's where I get my information from. Not fucking Black Authority. Somebody who is bringing up the topic, again, in service to white supremacy, right? He didn't explain a goddamn thing about the risk profiles of an mRNA vaccine. He didn't explain to you how an mRNA vaccine works, right? That is putting that mRNA into your cells. Your cells are replicating the spike protein only. And once the spike protein is actually being created, your T cells are actually attaching to those, and your immune system is actually identifying those spike proteins as an issue, and not going into long-term memory of the cell, which part of the immune system has the long-term memory versus the short-term. He didn't go into anything. He went into bullshit speculation, conspiratorial speculation, which actually has the net effect of deprioritizing on the demand side for the vaccine for black people. In a previous, the one we talked about, the DC caller, the previous caller said correctly that the biggest thing, because we're dying at a rate 4 times greater than anybody else, black men specifically. Funny that black men are dying at a rate 4 times greater than white males, and yet Black Authority, with a supposed MGTOW-esque channel, doesn't see coronavirus, which affects black men at a 4 times greater lethality rate. That's not a big issue. And then with the issue of the doctor dying, which I'll go into in a separate video, he doesn't actually go into actually how that applies as well. That you could have somebody who could recover from coronavirus and they're just simply being neglected, right? He didn't really go into that. He used her as almost like hey, see, that's why you shouldn't trust blah, blah, blah. And it was just all over the place. But none of this matters because at the end of the day, what he's doing is he's a tool because he's a person of what's it called. But they're exercising power too. Let's take it back. Let's bring it back. He's exercising power too because all he's trying to do is trying to grow a channel. That's all of them are trying to do. They're trying to grow a channel. But this was a legitimate situation with Trump. This situation with the voter fraud was a very real situation, and it could have been handled on January 6th had this call not happened. Had this call not happened, Pence would have had the political capital in order to handle the situation properly. But after this call, the biggest sin of this call is that, well, I'm going to let Eli Pope go into this. So in this scene, if you take out Olivia Pope and you replace it with the office of the presidency itself, everything that's here applies to Donald Trump.
You're funny. You're a funny, funny man.
I am.
Or should I say boy? You're a boy. You've been coddled and cared for, pampered and hugged. For you, it's always summertime and the living is easy. Daddy's rich and your mama's good looking. You're a grand. You got money in your blood. You are a boy. I'm a man. I have worked for every single thing I have ever received. I have fought and scraped and bled for every inch of ground I walk on. I was the first in my family to go to college. My daughter went to boarding school with the children of kings. I made that happen. You cried yourself to sleep because Daddy hurt your feelings, because Papa banged his secretary, because it hurt to have so much money. You spoiled, entitled, ungrateful little brat. You have everything handed to you on a silver platter, and you squander it. You're given the world, and you can appreciate it because you haven't had to work for anything. So now you've decided that the one thing that you want is my daughter, my child, mine, what I made, what I created. You could talk about what a great lay she is to try to get a response from me all you want, but guess what? I am actually, quite literally, above your pay grade, which means that I know that you believe that you are in love with her, as wrong as you may be.
I do love her.
You love that she is a door-marked exit. You love that she is your way out. Because if you are with Olivia Pope, you don't have to fulfill your father's dream of being president. If you are with Olivia, you no longer have to be your father's son. An apple never falls too far from the tree. You are always going to be Senator Grant's disappointing boy, Fitz. She is always going to be the formidable Olivia Pope. Don't use the person that I made to make you into a man. You're a boy.
You don't know anything about me.
Sadly, boy, I know everything about you. You disappoint me as a suitor for my daughter's hand.
Again, if you take the Olivia Pope reference, slide in the office of the presidency, you take his current position as president and slide in his track record as a real estate developer, every single thing applies, right? And I think that this is the biggest sin of that call, is that he is asking for power. He is begging a governor and a secretary of state to exercise their power on his behalf when he's supposed to be more powerful than them. That is the biggest sin, right? Now, let me talk about power, and let me talk about civilization real quick. Power is the rule of the jungle, right? Nobody's going to take a lion into court and say, hey, you killed several children. In the fact that you killed several calf water buffaloes. They were just born 2 months ago, and you killed them. You bit them on the neck, and then you ate them alive. You and these females over here that are sitting over here in the courtroom, you guys murdered and ate this woman's this female cow's child. Nobody's going to have that type of court. Why? No one's going to even step in and do anything about it. Why? Because at a natural level, at a base level, at a primal level, the exercise of power is the exercise of dominance, up to and including murder, right? Up to and including child murder in that case, with a tiger killing a days old calf, right? We're not going to be speciesists, right? The exercise of power is, hey, I'm a snake. You're a rat, just chilling. I'm going to eat you if I can. No one's going to stop me from doing it either. Humans with their lofty civilization and their lofty ideals of power and their lofty machinations will not step in and right this wrong. They're going to stand by and watch me kill you and eat you because I'm a snake and you're a rat and I'm chilling off in the cut and I caught you, motherfucker. I caught you fair and fucking square, and guess what? You're mine. I don't care that you have a belly full of baby rats in you. That's more protein for me. I'm going to kill you. That is true primal exercise of power. So what is civilization? Civilization is a nice circular room that we created in the forest with a nice little floor to it. And we say, hey, we have a thin layer that says that please don't go outside of these boundaries. Please don't murder or kill someone. Please don't do that. Please stay inside of this boundary we call civilization, we call rule of law, and exercise a higher level of power, right? Elevate yourself to a higher level of power within this civilization. Within this civilization, we're going to elevate you to a higher level of power and give to you all the resources collected within this civilization if you can play by the rules within this civilization. Now, the civilization still has walls, so you can still get close to breaking the law and getting so close to the primal level of the rule of law that you're almost outside of it into the state of the jungle. It's gonna have a thin floor, so you could start digging, and eventually you'll get to the sandy mud foundation of the jungle floor, and you can go there. But we're gonna create a boundary, an idea of a boundary, and we're gonna target this exercise of power upward. If you could think about it, if a tiger had to become smarter in order to get food, right? If it had to become smarter in order to get food, if it had to channel its animalistic prowess to become smarter in order to get food over multiple generations, that animal would become smarter and smarter and smarter, right? If you had a collectivist situation where they collectively created ever increasing mores and social statuses and philosophical ideas that made that ascension higher, that sort of built that staircase, that philosophical staircase higher and higher and higher, you could have a situation where a quote-unquote lower animal over multiple generations would be on the same level as humans, right? You're taking that primal instinct to kill, saying that primal instinct has to go through an intelligence growth, and eventually if you keep on shunting that natural inclination to express power into a need to acquire knowledge and intelligence, eventually that species will become ever more intelligent, up to and including the level of humans. If there's anything that we've done as a human race, we've channeled our acquisition of power, which includes murdering to eat and fucking to produce offspring. We've channeled those primal instincts into a societal building, civilization building tool. We've said, hey, if you want to do that, fine, you could do that, but you're going to be in the jungle. You're going to be, subject to saber-toothed tigers and all sorts of other shit that's going to possibly kill you, right? or you can come over here and be a part of this civilization. And if you're a part of this civilization, we're going to give you a pathway for you to eventually be able to share in more resources or control all resources if you go through our channel of power, right? And doing that over multiple generations is how we've created a civilization, by channeling that. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't actually exist still. So what happened in this election? We have a pure exercise of power. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, I'm sure Hillary Clinton said we cannot beat Trump. He's tapped into white racism. There is a large amount of white racism. We know because we're racist too. And there's a huge amount of white racists, of racist liberals in the Democratic Party that he's tapping into as well. We can't beat him. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to cheat him. We're going to cheat. That's exactly what the fuck we're going to do. We're going to cheat. We're going to take it. We're going to take power. And what does he do in return? He shows his fluffy belly and asks for the Georgia governor and the Georgia Secretary of State to stroke it lovingly. He asked to be tickled behind his ears. He says, "Mommy, it's not fair. They stole it." As opposed to exercising the vast power of his office to correct this wrong, he's begging on a phone call with clearly no one in his staff ever saying, "Hey guys, what if this call is recorded?" Because an exercise of power is also an exercise in keeping people loyal around you and having those loyal people advise you properly. And clearly nobody told him, "Hey, what's the point? What's our objective with this call? We're calling them, but they could record it. So what's our objective here? What's worth the risk of this call being recorded and broadcast? What's worth us doing this?" Because the negative effects is that we look like we're begging for something that we don't have. And by doing so, we acknowledge that we don't have it. We're begging to win Georgia, but by doing so, we're saying that we lost. So what are we hoping to get out of this conversation that's worth the risk of us doing that? If you don't have the power to keep people loyal, then you don't have the power, then you shouldn't have the power in the first place. If you don't have the power to keep people loyal to advise you properly, then you should not have the power in the first place. So when you're talking about senators, federal senators, right? Congressional senators at the federal level, you're talking about snakes. You're talking about individuals who will, I don't care about Bernie Sanders, fuck him too. He applies as well. You're talking about people who would literally slit their mothers' throats if it'll help them win re-election. They will gladly pump their mother full of Ambien pills and let her go to the great beyond if it means that they can get re-elected. Outside of the presidency and outside of, well, even though it's been devalued with the Texas judgment, outside of being a Supreme Court justice, being a United States senator at the federal level is a very powerful position and a very lucrative position once you actually are no longer in power. But power is more lucrative than money. Power is more important than money, right? Ask Joe Biden that, right? And his use of power to create money for his son, right? Whether it be through corrupt means or not, right? But you're talking to those individuals. You're trying to be the alpha of those individuals, and those individuals have now just heard you on a fucking phone call begging for power, as opposed to exercising it. You've lost Trump. Nothing is going to happen on January 6th other than a long, drawn-out, dramatic fight in order for those senators to possibly cannibalize your base and put up enough theatrics to hopefully not to pass any sort of future purity test when it comes down to you. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that Joe Biden is going to become president because you've conceded in the form of you are choosing not to exercise power. And you are begging for power. You know, I think at the very least what you should have done in your presidency is just watch Scandal every fucking day. Like on rerun. You should have watched Scandal. Or you could have had one of your staff just go through and listen to every single thing that Eli Pope says. And have that be your mantra every single day. Like, have a little device on you that basically randomizes an Eli Pope quote about power. Right? And then listen to that and then apply that. Because you have no idea what you just did with this phone call. But let's see what you just did.
Sit. I ordered you a glass of wine.
You knew I was coming.
I know your plane landed this morning. Call me a hopeful father.
Chateau Antoine, 91. You are spoiling me.
The island was spoiling you. This is a bribe.
You want me to go back?
Gotta give you permission to leave.
Dad.
You shouldn't be here, Olivia. You decided that for yourself. You asked to be removed. You asked to be on that plane. And yet, here you are.
My friend is dead. Harrison died.
I'm sorry for your loss. Ask me. Ask me, it's okay. I know you need to. I know that's where we are. Who I am, who I've been to you. Ask me.
Did you have anything to do with it? Did you have Harrison killed?
No. I had nothing to do with your friend's murder.
I could play the rest, but he basically does the exact same thing. How does this have anything to do with power? Because he's lying in this matter. He actually did kill his friend, or kill her friend. And he didn't actually kill her mother, even though later on in the scene he basically says that. What does this have to do with power? It's because if you have to ask, then you deserve a lie. If you have to ask, you deserve a lie. The pause that he did earlier when she asked the question, right here.
I'm sorry for your loss.
He knew that she didn't know. She had a suspicion, but she didn't know. She had a suspicion, but she didn't have any evidence. And so, if you don't have any evidence to refute the lie that's about to come, then you deserve a lie. Taking it back to this call. If you don't have any evidence to refute the lie, then you deserve the lie. Because if you had the evidence for the lie, you wouldn't be on the call begging for somebody else to do something for you. You would be using that evidence and acting. But you're not, so you deserve a lie. The last thing I'm gonna say.
Olivia.
Where is he?
was you, wasn't it? From the very beginning, you stole the files, you called the Post. Billy Torrance was just a patsy, a tool, collateral damage. He truly loved Diane Peters, and you destroyed them all so you could force her resignation and have yourself named her successor.
I'm detecting a note of anger in your voice.
A man is dead, Jake. An innocent man.
Yes. And the world is a safer place because of it.
How can you say that?
Because Diane Peters was weak. She had no idea what was going on under her nose. A dragon reared its head, blew fire from its nostrils, and all she heard was thunder. The world is a safer place. And you can either stand there like a 12-year-old and lecture me about morality, or even worse, rat us out in the name of justice, or you can take your cue from us and get yourself some power. Real power. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue power. You think you have that now, but you're standing on the sidelines screaming at the referee like a sad, drunk parent at a high school football game. If you're okay with that, by all means, but I know my daughter as I know my son, and I know that won't suffice.
One more game.
Or even a safer place. And you can either stand there like a 12-year-old and lecture me about morality, or even worse, rat us out in the name of justice, or you can take your cue from us and get yourself some power. Real power. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue power. You think you have that now, but you're standing on the sidelines screaming at the referee like a sad, drunk parent at a high school football game. If you're okay with that, by all means, but I know my daughter as I know my son, and I know that won't suffice.
And what was this individual doing on this call? Other than screaming on the phone like a little child, trying to have people who he previously denigrated to the white meat, in the hopes that they would express, that they would exercise their power. What is the lesson to be learned here? The lesson to be learned here, there's a nice little before, during, and after, right? Before the exercise of power, your opponent knows who you are, right? Your opponent knows who you are, because from an art of war perspective, they have to know you in order to win in order to guarantee the win. They have to know you. But you have to also know yourself. And Trump believes the hype about himself as opposed to knowing truly who he is on a base level. Knowing truly who he is and who he is not on a base level. He has a false identity, whereas his enemies do not have a false identity of themselves. Biden knows that he's a racist piece of shit. Biden knows that he's out scamming other countries, in order to enrich himself and his family. There is absolutely no issues with himself with regards to that. There's also a possibility of him being a pedophile from some of those goddamn from some of those goddamn videos of him. He knows exactly who the fuck he is, and he does not give a flying fuck about it. But he knows who he is. He doesn't care that you know, but he knows who he is. Trump doesn't. But what this is talking about, this little clip is talking about your enemy, your opponent knows you. You may think they don't, but they do. They may say things that are quote unquote insulting, and that you may want to actually dismiss because you can define them as insulting, but actually they are the most honest thing you will ever hear in your life. Right? If an enemy berates you, they are speaking truth, right? They are speaking the God's honest truth. An enemy has to know you. An enemy has to know you. So when they insult you, they are telling you the truth. But because you define it as an insult, you dismiss it. While your enemy is actually doing machinations against you. In this case, it was against her local interests, but for her global interests, right? In his mind, But when an enemy is doing something against you, right? If you don't know or have the evidence and you go to your enemy to have them tell you something, you deserve a lie from them. You deserve a comforting lie. You deserve to have to waste your time. What you're saying to your enemy is, I couldn't find any evidence. I couldn't find any convincing evidence. Not that Trump doesn't have evidence of voter fraud. He does. But I couldn't find convincing enough evidence in order to justify a use of power against you. And I'm so desperate to find out the truth that I have to now come to you hopefully to have power or to have the situation explained to me, because otherwise I couldn't have it explained. Because otherwise I couldn't have it explained. Otherwise I couldn't figure it out myself. I have to come to you and have you tell me whether or not I'm right about this, because I don't have any evidence to actually, I don't have enough evidence to act on you with the evidence I have, right? And if you're doing that, your enemy deserves to lie to you, and that's exactly what the hell was happening on this phone call. He was being lied to directly by these individuals. But if you have to come to them, then you deserve a lie from them. They're your opponent. They're your enemy. You believing, oh, we're all Republicans and blah, 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 blah. No, they're your enemy. And if you're too stupid to realize that, or if you don't have enough evidence in order to see that, then you deserve a lie. And then after your enemy successfully completes an operation against you, or successfully completes an operation, do not expect that enemy to have remorse in any way, shape, fashion, or form. They're not going to have remorse for you after they've successfully completed an exercise of power. You're not going to go over to the lion and say, "Lion, you ate a baby. That's so wrong of you." If anything, the lion is looking up at you, thinking to himself, do I want more meat? Or do I just want to bite this person? Or is my belly full enough to where I'm just going to sit here for a little bit longer and wait for him to get a little bit closer before I bite his face off or bite his throat out? After your enemy has successfully completed something, don't expect them to have remorse. This is from a fictional TV show, from a fictional character, written by a black woman who happens to have Democratic leanings. And yet the President of the United States doesn't realize that by having this phone conversation, he has completely tanked his political capital entirely. Those senators now are thinking to themselves, how can we best fight in a mock way so that we pass a purity test if we ever need to run on the fact that we're a Trump Republican, so that we could pass a purity test in the future, but we're not going to sit around here and actually have this guy win because he's committed a cardinal sin. He's committed a cardinal sin of power. He's asked for it, which is something you just don't do. His campaign, his presidency is over with this phone call, is my prediction. I was waiting until January 6th in order to come out, you know what I'm saying, and see. And I was holding fast on my previous prediction that he was going to try to stay in office and this, that, and the third, that a deal was made and then broken. This phone call right here is the musings of a small child begging for power. You are currently the president of the United States of America, and you sat up here and completely dismissed martial law as an actual a thing that should be done in this situation. Fine, you're abandoning a huge amount of your authority and power in the process of doing so, but you can choose to do so if you have a better strategy. Your better strategy than instituting martial law and actually having a rerun of those elections in those states is to hop on a phone call and beg? Okay. I hope Florida is very nice in January, because it seems like you're going to be heading your ass back to West Palm Beach on January 21st. And it's pretty pathetic. It's really pathetic that this individual does not know how to express power in the correct way, that he does not know how to actually apply power properly. It is pathetic that that is the situation that he is in, that he is going to allow his presidency to die on the sword of begging the Georgia governor and Secretary of State to find 11,000 votes. He shouldn't have never even been on the phone in the first place. But he was, and there you have it. And as a little bit of a bonus, we're going to go ahead and go here. A large amount of people hate on Scandal because of the whole bedwench thing, and they use that as some sort of example, like Tariq Nasheed. You know, a large amount of people hate on Scandal, but Scandal is my shit. I'm gonna be honest with you. And the reason it's my shit is mostly because of Eli Pope. People try to talk about the fact that Olivia Pope is a bedwench, and she is. But there's also a character named Eli Pope who sort of doesn't want that to happen, right? He sort of still happened, which is kind of weird because of the whole little love triangle with his quote-unquote son. But at the end of the day, you still had a black male-led character sort of pointing out the sort of racial lens of power. And so for us, for my people, for the descendants of American slaves, as we talk about power and its application, I would like to remind you guys of this powerful, nice little scene from Scandal.
No.
You've gotten yourself into a bit of trouble, Olivia, and I'm here to fix it.
No.
Now listen to me. You raised your skirt and opened your knees and gave it away to a man with too much power. You're not rare, you're not special. Your story's no different than 1,000 other stories in this town, so you know how this goes. You could call this in your sleep. First they'll smile, be warm, sympathetic, on your side, letting you know that they will fight for you. They will lull you into a false sense of security. And then, once your belly is exposed, they will gut you and everyone you know. And they will be swift about it. And by the time you realize you should be fighting back, well, you're already bleeding to death. That is the presidency versus you. Whose victory do you think they will fight for? Whose body do you think they will bury?
He would never.
He would never. You and I both know that he is not in charge. He is never in charge. Power is in charge. Power got him elected. I know more than you could possibly imagine about things of which you cannot dream. He told you that you would be First Lady, and you believed him. Did I not raise you for better? How many times have I told you you have to be what? You have to be what?
Twice.
What?
Twice as good.
Twice as good as them to get half what they have. Sleeping with that. For God's sakes, you know to aim higher. At the very least, you could have aimed for Chief of Staff, Secretary of State, First Lady. Do you have to be so mediocre? Your staff will be taken care of financially. Your business will continue to run. Money is not a problem. There's always money. Money bought that plane. Money bought the silence of the gentleman who will fly that plane. On board, you will find an envelope. It contains a passport, a Swiss bank book, a Go file, an entirely new identity. There is a very nice island waiting for you at the end of the flight. You will stay there for 8 months. Then I can arrange a place for you in Brussels, Thailand, if you prefer, Johannesburg, any place but here, really, as long as you disappear.
And what if I don't want to go?
Olivia, you're getting on that plane come hell or high water. And to be clear, I am the hell and the high water.
So if you replace that scene with Trump as Olivia Pope and the establishment as the power that's going against her, right? And instead of First Lady, he wanted to be a legitimate presidency, a legitimate president, or considered one. That is the scene that's going to transpire on January 20th, thanks to this dumbass, ill-advised phone call. The sin that was created, the sin that was made, the sin that was done is that you asked for power. People talk about this show in many, many ways, but Eli Pope was the true hero, in my opinion, of this show. He was the true fucking operator in this show, even though he did get checked in a weird way, because Olivia turned dark as fuck in the last season. But he was the real star of this show, and one of the things that was always a true statement in the show was, you don't take command, command takes you. You don't take power, power takes you. Seems odd at first when you hear that type of analogy, but power exists independent of you. Once you show your teeth and show that you're useful to power, then power chooses you to be with it and to wield it on others. But as soon as you show your weakness, power will still exist. The office of the presidency, in this case, will still exist. You just won't be in it. And the biggest fucking sin of that call is he's begging the Georgia governor and the Secretary of State for Georgia to do something with their power, as opposed to informing them of what he planned to do with his own. You don't take command, command takes you. And unfortunately, Trump is about to lose to, in my opinion, a criminally compromised individual, and pave the way for Kamala Harris to be president within the first year. And when the history books are written, this call, in my opinion, is the linchpin, from those who study power, is the linchpin as to why he lost it.